Picking up an orphan from the dump, Gleb rushed to his dying daughter's side, taking the girl with him. But before she even read the instructions on the medicine, written in Swedish, Gleb was horrified. Before we begin our story, write in the comments, what city are you from? Enjoy listening. Gleb gripped the steering wheel tighter as his black SUV slowly rolled along the abandoned, overgrown road. He had no idea how he ended up at this dump. For the past hour, he had been hopelessly winding between mountains of trash. It all started when he was inspecting the site where he planned to build his new factory. Everything was going according to plan until he took a wrong turn. Now, lost, he desperately searched for someone to point him back. His phone was dead, the GPS useless. Only the locals remained here, and suddenly, he saw a little girl. She was crawling through the trash, her small hands digging in the filth, as if searching for something precious. She wore an old, dark purple jacket, clearly not hers, probably her grandmother's, with a diamond pattern, and her padded pants were worn and too small for her. "Hey, girl," Gleb called out loudly. "What are you doing here?" She didn't answer. Gleb frowned. Maybe she was deaf or just scared. He inhaled the autumn air, thick with the stench of waste, and stepped out of the car. His sleek black coat, perfectly tailored, stood out against the surrounding decay. His shoes were instantly covered in dust, but he didn't care. He approached her. Now the girl looked at him with fear, but also curiosity. "Can you hear me?" Gleb repeated softly. The child silently nodded. "So what are you doing here?" She just shook her head. Gleb gritted his teeth, so she could talk but didn't want to. "Great, now I have to guess," he thought irritably. "Well, he began, but to his surprise, she interrupted in a squeaky voice. "What's a banana?" Gleb was stunned. "You're serious? You've never tried a banana?" The child shook her head. "It's a fruit. It grows in hot countries, like Africa." The girl's eyes lit up. "Africa? Wow! Then I definitely want to try it." Gleb couldn't help but smile. She was so small and naive. He opened the car door, inviting her inside. The girl hesitated, then clumsily climbed into the passenger seat. As soon as she was in the car, the fear in her eyes turned to genuine wonder. "Wow, what a huge car!" she exclaimed in awe. "I've only seen these in the city. I've only ridden on a tractor before." Gleb listened to her chatter as he pulled a bunch of bananas from the glove compartment. "Catch! Here, take one. You don't need to peel it, just bite." The girl eagerly grabbed the banana but ate slowly, as if savoring every bite. "Good?" Gleb asked. She nodded. "Yes, my name's Lotta. Now tell me, why are you here?" Lotta froze for a second, then sighed softly. "Can I finish eating first?" Gleb nodded, understanding she was stalling, unwilling to talk about something unpleasant. Finally, when the banana was gone, the girl reluctantly began to speak. "I live nearby with my grandmother. My mom and dad? I don't have any. The neighbors call me an orphan. I don't like that word. It's sad." Gleb felt something tighten inside him. "Grandma got very sick. There's not even a store in our village, and the doctor comes from the next town once a week. He brings medicine, but it's expensive. Once I heard Grandma ask the doctor to give it to her on credit." Gleb tensed. "And?" Lotta lowered her eyes. "He refused, said the debt would grow like a snowball. Grandma didn't take the medicine because we only had enough money for food." For a moment, silence filled the car. "And you decided to earn the money yourself?" Gleb asked. She nodded. "If I find something valuable at the dump, I can sell it. People feel sorry for me, so they buy easily." Gleb turned to her, looking at her differently now. "What have you sold?" Lotta pulled a crumpled 200 ruble bill from her pocket. I found knitted hats, washed them in the river, and sold them to old ladies. They probably thought their grandmothers made them, but it wasn't her," she confessed. Gleb sighed heavily. "That's not enough for the medicine," he said, more to himself than to her. "Do you remember the name?" Lotta frowned. "It's long. It's written on a piece of paper on my grandmother's dresser." Gleb didn't hesitate. "Let's go get it." Lotta looked at him fearfully. "Really? You want to help?" Gleb closed his eyes, holding his breath. "Yes." Lotta beamed. "But I still need to find something at the dump. Maybe the doctor will trade for the medicine." Gleb shook his head. "No more crawling through trash. Deal?" The girl sighed. "Okay, fine. Now help me get out of here."
The road to the village was longer than Gleb expected. Lotta chattered nonstop, her legs swinging as she curiously examined the car's interior. Gleb didn't need to be a psychologist to understand that the girl, though trying to appear brave, didn't fully trust him yet. A stranger, a grown man, suddenly offering help and putting her in an expensive car, it was suspicious. "So where do I turn?" he asked, carefully watching the road. Lotta pointed with her tiny finger. "See that big pile over there? To the left is a path. We need to go that way." Gleb frowned. He didn't like the idea of venturing deeper into this trash maze, but he had no choice. He slowly steered the car in the indicated direction. "How long have you been collecting things here?" he asked after a pause. "About a month," Lotta replied simply. Gleb glanced at her out of the corner of his eye. "A month, and no one noticed?" The girl shrugged. "Who would notice? Grandma is almost always asleep. We don't have many neighbors. And who comes to the dump besides people like me?" Gleb gripped the wheel tighter. "It's not right. You're a child. You shouldn't be crawling through the dirt." Lotta suddenly smiled, but there was no joy in her voice. "What else can I do? Grandma says that once our village had a lot of people. Now everyone has left. The store is open every other day, and the doctor comes once a week. No one helps us." Gleb frowned. He was used to money solving everything in his world. If you're sick, call a doctor. If you need something, order delivery. If you're lost, turn on the GPS. But here, in the middle of nowhere, his usual rules didn't apply. "We'll figure it out," he said, as if making an internal decision. Lotta pointed to a narrow path between the overgrowth. "There, we need to go there." The car emerged from behind a hill, and Gleb saw a strange sight. A tiny village, as if cut out of the past. The houses, built in the last century, seemed hunched over, with sagging windows covered in grime and empty, abandoned yards. "There's our house, number 3, Lotta said, pointing to one of the old wooden houses. Gleb parked near the gate, which creaked as Lotta pushed it open. "Grandma!" she called out, running inside. Gleb stood at the threshold, inhaling the heavy, stale air of the house. It smelled of dampness, old wood, and something else, maybe medicine or mothballs. In the tiny room, an old woman lay on a sagging bed. She was frail, with gray hair tied in a thin braid. She slowly turned her head at the sound of her granddaughter's voice. "Lotta, where have you been?" Her voice was weak, but filled with tenderness. "I found a good man. He's got to help," Lotta said cheerfully, climbing onto a stool to reach the dresser. Gleb entered, barely suppressing the urge to cover his nose. Poverty was evident in every detail, the faded rug, the cracked dishes on the wooden table. "Who are you?" the old woman asked, looking at him with weakened eyes. "Let's say I'm a philanthropist," he replied, realizing it was too early to tell her the truth. The woman laughed hoarsely. "Philanthropists don't come here, son." Lotta found the piece of paper with the prescription and handed it to Gleb. "Here, Grandma says she won't be able to walk without these pills." Gleb unfolded the note, but the doctor's handwriting was so illegible that it was impossible to make out. "The pharmacy will understand," he muttered, folding the note. The old woman looked at him wearily. "If it's not too much trouble, bring the medicine. I'll pay when the pension comes." Gleb felt a heaviness in his chest. "You don't need to pay. I'll bring them for free." The woman frowned, but said nothing. Lotta was beaming. "So Grandma will get better?" "Of course," Gleb said, not knowing how true his words were. The road to the city was longer than Gleb had expected. The SUV carefully navigated the bumpy road. "There are a lot of children there, right? Are they all sick like my grandma? And do the doctors wear white coats like in the movies?" Lotta asked. Gleb smiled slightly and pressed the gas pedal a little harder. "The hospital is huge. They treat both children and adults there. The doctors do wear white coats, but that doesn't make them smarter." Lotta frowned. "Aren't they supposed to help?" "They are, but sometimes they just don't know what to do." Lotta thought for a moment, then asked shyly, "And your daughter? Has she been there long?" Gleb clenched his jaw. "For several weeks, she's been sleeping." Lotta sighed and clasped her hands together, staring out the window. "Does she have toys?" "Of course," Gleb replied, though deep down he knew that the expensive dolls and plush toys filling her room weren't enough. "What if she's sad?" Lotta glanced at him. Gleb didn't know what to say. How could he explain to a 6-year-old that his daughter was lying in a hospital bed and he couldn't do anything but watch? "Maybe if she feels loved, she'll wake up." Lotta's words struck Gleb harder than he expected. He looked away from the road for a second to glance at the girl, a simple village girl who knew far more about life than she should at her age. "I tell her I love her every day," Gleb said quietly. Lotta bit her lip. "And if that's not enough?" Gleb didn't have an answer. When they arrived in the city, the sun was already setting. Lotta pressed her nose against the window, looking at the streets with wonder, as if seeing them for the first time. "Wow, everything is lit up!" she exclaimed in awe, pointing at the neon signs of the stores. "Why are there so many cars in your city?" Gleb chuckled. "Because people are always in a hurry, some to work, some home, and some to the hospital." Lotta nodded, clearly pleased with her conclusion, and pressed her face against the window again. When they finally reached the hospital, the girl suddenly froze. "Is that the building where your daughter is being treated?" Gleb nodded. "Yes." She looked puzzled. "It looks like a castle." Gleb smiled. "Believe me, Lotta, if it were a castle, my daughter would have gotten better long ago." They got out of the car. Gleb helped the girl down, then they headed toward the entrance. "Stay close and be quiet," Gleb warned. Lotta nodded, but the curiosity in her eyes was too obvious. In the lobby, they were met by a security guard who glanced at the well-dressed man in an expensive suit and the girl who clearly wasn't from around here. "It's late, Gleb Sergeyevich," the guard said. "I know. I need to see my daughter." The guard frowned but said nothing. He knew it was useless to argue with Gleb. When they went up to the second floor and entered the room, Lotta fell silent. In the center of the room, on a wide hospital bed, lay Kira, pale, fragile, with an IV in her arm. She looked like a porcelain doll. "She's really sleeping," Lotta whispered, afraid to break the silence. Gleb approached the bed and gently adjusted the blanket. "Yes, for too long." Lotta took a step forward, but her eyes fell on an empty medicine bottle on the nightstand. She picked it up, examined it, and then frowned. "What's wrong?" Gleb asked, surprised by her reaction. Lotta pursed her lips, furrowing her brow as she read. "I can read what's written here." Gleb turned sharply to her. "You can read Swedish?" Lotta nodded. "Yes, Grandma says I learn quickly. We had an old book at home with a translation dictionary." Gleb frowned. "And what does it say?" Lotta read, furrowing her brow, then slowly pronounced,
It says here that each drop contains 200 milligrams of the active ingredient. Gleb shuddered. 200? He grabbed the bottle, pulled out his phone, and turned on the translator. No, this can't be, he whispered, reading the text on the screen. But there was no mistake. The medicine Kira was being given didn't match what the doctors had prescribed. Moreover, the dosage was 3 times the allowable limit. Gleb felt his chest tighten. This wasn't the medicine Kira was supposed to be taking. Lada looked at him with wide eyes. Does that mean she's being treated wrong? Gleb stood up. His thoughts raced. If Kira had been deliberately poisoned, it meant someone had intended it. The doctors, the nurses, or someone higher up. He couldn't stay here. He needed to check the medicine. Lada, we're leaving, he said, grabbing the bottle and taking the girl's hand as he hurried toward the exit. Deep inside, anger was rising. Someone wanted his daughter to never wake up.
Gleb drove faster than he should have. Lada sat beside him, gripping the seatbelt tightly and occasionally casting worried glances at him. She could feel the tension building inside him. It seemed the air in the car was about to thicken from what was going on in his mind. "Uncle Gleb, are you angry?" she asked quietly. Gleb clenched his teeth. "Yes, I'm very angry." Lada fidgeted, not knowing what to say. Her gaze darted between the medicine bottle Gleb was clutching and his face, as dark as a storm. "What if it's just a mistake?" she asked softly. Gleb gripped the reel tighter. If it's a mistake, someone has to answer for it. And if it's not, he didn't finish, but Lada understood that this option didn't bode well. They reached the laboratory 20 minutes later. Gleb didn't waste time parking right at the entrance. "My acquaintance," he said, pushing open the door. A woman in a white coat sat at the reception desk. When she saw Gleb, she perked up immediately. "Gleb Sergeyevich, what brings you here?" "I need Leonid Dmitrievich, urgently." She nodded and dialed a number on the phone. A moment later, a man in his 40s with neatly combed dark hair came out. He looked at Gleb and Lada in surprise, then chuckled. "You look like you're ready to kill someone. What happened?" Gleb handed him the bottle. "Check this. I need exact data on what's in here and whether the composition matches what's on the label." Leonid raised his eyebrows, but saw that his friend wasn't in the mood for jokes. He silently nodded. "Okay, leave it with me. But such analyses take time. I'll manage by evening, but no sooner." Gleb clenched his fists. "This is very important." Leonid just spread his hands. "I understand, but magic doesn't exist. Call me in the evening." Gleb nodded, turned and headed for the exit. Lada hurried after him, getting tangled in the long sleeves of her grandmother's jacket. "And now what?" she asked as soon as they were outside. Gleb thought for a moment. "Going back to the hospital doesn't make sense yet. Now we'll take care of your grandma," he said, heading toward the car. On the way to the pharmacy, Glenn thought about what awaited him in the evening. If Leonid confirmed his worst fears, it would mean that someone had deliberately replaced Kira's medicine, and then he would have a new goal, to find out who was behind it.
When they returned to the village, it was already dark. The streetlights here, of course, didn't work, but Lada unerringly pointed the way to the house. "Grandma!" she called out, running inside. The old woman sat up in bed, looking at her granddaughter in surprise. "Lada, what happened?" Gleb followed, placing the medicine on the table. "Your pills, Inaida Vasilyevna. Now you have no right to be sick." The woman stared at the packages, then looked at him. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need. Just take the medicine on time." The old woman smiled weakly. "Okay, son." Lada beamed. "Now you'll definitely get better." Gleb watched this scene and, for the first time in a long time, felt a sense of peace. But deep down, he knew the storm was just beginning. Gleb sat at the table, watching as Zinaida Vasilyevna carefully examined the packages of medicine. Her gnarled fingers trembled, not from weakness, but from surprise. It seemed she didn't believe until the last moment that someone would truly help, that this stranger in an expensive suit would bring her salvation. Lada settled beside her, propping her head on her hands. She looked at her grandmother with joyful anticipation, as if hoping that after taking one pill, she would immediately get up and go for a walk with her. "You must take them strictly according to the instructions," the old woman finally said, thoughtfully examining the Bilster pack of pills. "You know, Lada, medicine is like this. If you use it correctly, it will heal you. But if not, it can make things worse." Gleb felt an unpleasant pang inside. He now knew all too well how dangerous medicine could be if used incorrectly. Zinaida Vasilyevna finally looked up at him. "Gleb, son, how can I ever repay you for all this?" He waved his hand. "I wouldn't take a kopeck from you, even if I wanted to." The old woman sighed. "That doesn't happen. No one gives anything for free." "I'm not no one," Gleb replied calmly, "and I don't expect anything in return." The woman looked at him with gratitude, but doubt was still visible in her eyes. Gleb had seen this many times. People who had spent their whole lives fighting for every kopeck couldn't believe that help could be given without expecting anything in return. "Well, if you don't want money, at least have some tea after the road," she finally said, and slowly got out of bed. Gleb felt a dull anxiety growing inside him. Now he had to find out the truth. Gleb sat behind the wheel, gloomily staring at the road. Inside him, tension was mounting. He felt that the answers he feared were already close. The city met him with the cold glow of streetlights, streams of cars, and crowds of people hurrying about their business, unaware of the storm raging in one man's mind. Gleb turned toward the laboratory, but hadn't even parked when his phone vibrated in his pocket. He answered immediately. His voice sounded hoarser than he intended. On the other end of the line, Leonid sighed. "Everything is bad, Gleb." Gleb gripped the wheel, but remained silent, waiting for details. "The drug they gave you is not what should have been administered to your daughter. Its composition is completely different from the original medicine. And the worst thing, Gleb, is the dosage. It's simply monstrous. 200 milligrams is 3 times more than can be given to a child." Gleb closed his eyes. Everything he had suspected was confirmed. So they had been poisoning her. His voice sounded hollow. "I see." Leonid hesitated. "I don't want to jump to conclusions, but yes, it looks that way." Gleb felt anger filling him. He wanted to rush to the hospital immediately and demand answers, but he knew that if he lost control now, if he acted rashly, he could only make things worse. "Who had access to the medicine?" he asked, trying to keep himself in check. "The chief doctor, the nurses, and of course the hospital pharmacy. But that doesn't mean they're all involved," Leonid replied. "If you want to figure this out, act carefully," he advised. Gleb understood that now he would have to play differently. "Thanks, Leonia. Keep me updated," and he hung up. Gleb leaned back in his seat. Now he knew his daughter had been poisoned deliberately, and he was determined to find out who was behind it.
Gleb drove to the meeting with his father, gripping the wheel so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Inside him, anger seethed, but he understood that if he wanted to bring everything to an end, he had to remain cold-blooded. This conversation wouldn't just be unpleasant, it would be the end of their relationship. Yegor Dmitrievich's office was located in the city center, in one of those strict gray buildings where everything was imbued with power, money, and cold calculation. The security guard at the entrance recognized him and silently nodded, letting him in. When Gleb entered the office, his father was sitting at a massive oak desk, casually sorting through papers. "Well, hello, son," he said, without even looking up. Gleb silently sat down across from him. "Haven't seen you in a long time," Yegor Dmitrievich continued, finally setting the documents aside and studying his son carefully. "You look nervous.
Gleb smiled faintly. Yes, my nerves have been on edge lately. His father slightly tilted his head as if studying him. You didn't want to talk about business, did you? Gleb held the pause. No. His father nodded as if he already understood everything. So you found out? Gleb felt everything inside him tighten. And what was I supposed to find out? His father leaned back in his chair, interlacing his fingers. Don't play dumb. If you're here, you've already figured everything out. Gleb looked straight into his icy eyes. Then tell me yourself. His father smirked. I knew you were a smart boy, just like me. Gleb clenched his teeth. So you're not even going to deny that you poisoned my daughter? For a moment, deadly silence reigned in the office. Yegor slightly raised his eyebrows. Such harshness, Gleb. What makes you think it was poisoning? Gleb slowly leaned forward. Because I checked the medicine. I know it wasn't what the doctors prescribed. I know the dosage was lethal, and I know you were behind those supplies. Yegor smiled. Let's say so. Gleb felt anger boiling inside him. Is that all you have to say? His father slightly rocked in his chair, as if this conversation were light entertainment. Do you think I wanted her dead? He asked mockingly. Gleb looked at him without blinking. What else could it have been? Yegor leaned closer. I wanted to free you from a mistake. Gleb didn't immediately understand what he was saying. He blinked as if he couldn't believe his ears. His father looked at him with cold superiority. I did everything so you could climb to the top. But you, he grimaced as if the word itself caused him disgust, fell in love. Gleb gripped the armrests with his fingers. You're talking about my daughter. Yegor leaned back. I'm talking about the burden you've hung around your neck. Gleb slightly tilted his head as if he couldn't believe his ears. His father looked at him with cold superiority. I wanted to save you. Gleb slowly exhaled, trying not to lose control. You're talking about my daughter. Yegor shrugged. A mistake. Gleb couldn't believe what was happening. You wanted to kill her, he whispered, without taking his eyes off his father's face. I wanted to save you, Yegor corrected. Gleb slammed his fist on the table, making the papers scatter. His father just smirked. She was supposed to die slowly and imperceptibly. The doctors would have thrown up their hands, said the body couldn't handle it. You would have suffered, but in the end, you would have understood that it was for the best. Gleb looked at him, unable to believe what he was hearing. You're sick. Yegor sighed, as if he was tired of this conversation. Son, I did it for you. You did it for yourself, because you can't stand that I didn't become your copy. His father shrugged. Perhaps. Gleb clenched his fists, barely restraining himself. You know what's funny, father? Yegor raised his eyebrows. Gleb took his phone out of his pocket and placed it on the table. The screen was lit. The recorder was on. His father's face twisted. You set me up. Gleb leaned toward him, his eyes burning with icy fire. No, father. You destroyed yourself. At that moment, the door burst open and two men in plain clothes entered. Yegor Dmitrievich Uspiensky, you're under arrest, one of them said. Gleb stepped back, allowing them to approach. Yegor looked around as if he couldn't believe what was happening. You wouldn't dare, he hissed. Gleb smiled wearily. You taught me yourself. One of the operatives put handcuffs on him. You're not my son, he spat. Gleb turned away and headed for the exit without looking back. Checkmate. The trial of Yegor Dmitrievich ended as it should have, with a verdict and handcuffs. When Gleb entered the courtroom that day, he saw his father sitting on the defendant's bench, not broken, not repentant, but full of contempt and hatred. "You destroyed me," he hissed through his teeth as Gleb walked past. Gleb paused for a second, then smirked. "I never had a family." The process was short. The evidence, recordings, testimonies of doctors and Sophia herself, who had made a deal for a lighter sentence, did their job. The judge pronounced the verdict clearly and without emotion. 20 years in a strict regime colony. His father didn't say a word. He didn't even look at Gleb as he was led away under guard. Gleb didn't look back either. The past no longer existed. Kira woke up 2 weeks after she was taken out of the hospital. Gleb was sitting by her bed, holding her little hand in his, when he suddenly felt a weak but distinct squeeze in response. "Dad?" Gleb sharply raised his head, and the next moment his heart seemed to explode with happiness. She was looking at him with clear, though tired eyes. "Daddy, I'm so tired of sleeping." Gleb couldn't hold back his tears. He leaned over and hugged her tightly, feeling all the fear, anger, and pain recede. "Sunshine, now everything will be okay." When Kira finally recovered, Gleb knew it was time to keep another promise. He returned to the village. Lada ran out to meet him as soon as he heard the sound of his car. "Uncle Gleb," she shouted, throwing herself at him. He caught her in his arms, and she immediately started talking, interrupting herself. "Grandma is better. I read books to her, and she told me fairy tales, and I learned how to bake pies. Try them." Gleb laughed. "Of course I will." Zinaida Vasilyevna came out onto the porch, now without a cane, without weakness in her eyes. She was the same old woman, but now there was more life in her gaze. "I didn't expect to see you again, son," she said, smiling. "I always keep my word," Gleb replied. Lada looked at him with shining eyes. "And how is your daughter?" Gleb smiled. "Much better, and she wants to meet the girl who saved her life." Lada shuddered in surprise. "Really?" "Really," Gleb confirmed. Lada bit her lip, then nodded happily. "I really want to be friends with her." Gleb ruffled her hair. "Then you have a whole life ahead of you to do that." Soon, everything really did fall into place. Zinaida Vasilyevna no longer suffered without medicine. Gleb bought her a small, cozy house closer to the city so that Lada wouldn't have to live in the cold and loneliness. Kira quickly became friends with Lada. Now they rode bikes together, went to the park, and played as if they had known each other all their lives. For the first time in a long time, Gleb didn't feel empty inside. Now, coming home, he heard laughter. He no longer sat in gloomy silence, afraid that tomorrow would be worse than today. Now he had something real, not just memories of what he had lost. One day, as he watched Kira and Lada drawing with chalk on the asphalt, Zinaida Vasilyevna came out to him on the veranda and sat down beside him. "Well, son, are you happy now?" she asked. Gleb looked at the girls and nodded. "Yes," he replied. "Now I am happy." Subscribe to the channel, like and comment on how you like this story. Click the bell to not miss new videos. See you soon, dear listeners.